this guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Oral questions. Questions orales. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
9 years of the NDP Liberals. Costs are up, taxes up, crime's up, time's up. This government has doubled the cost of housing, doubled the debt, forced 2 million people to the food bank, raised taxes, and now they want a 61-cent a litre carbon tax that will grind our economy to a halt. The good news is, in a carbon tax election, Canadians can axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. Can we bring it home now?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, maybe I can speak in a language the Leader of the Opposition will understand. They're going to cut the dental. They're going to axe the pharmacare, they're going to break the health system, and they're going to destroy childcare. The difference between those slogans and the nonsense he throws around, the vacuous garbage that's best left for Nabisco, not for the House of Commons, is that's the stuff he's actually going to do. And at some point, he's going to have to look in the eyes of seniors and tell them what he's going to do to dental care. He's going to have to look in the eyes of diabetes patients and say what he's going to do with their diabetes medication. At some time, the vitriol done and the truth comes.
Colleagues, we're skating pretty close to the line. I'd recommend for members to ensure that they don't do that. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I understand that when that member thinks of the prospect of a carbon tax election, he comes unglued and becomes very rattled and loses control of himself, waving his hands around because he's desperate to quadruple the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre. He's desperate to push a government takeover that will shut down people's private drug plans and ban them from having access to their medical plans. Common sense Conservatives will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, stop the crime, and protect your drug plan. How about that?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, this is the guy who said dental care doesn't exist. This is the guy that said providers won't sign up. Well, I got news for you. 750,000 people across this country got care. I also got news for you, Mr. Speaker, and that is more than 80% of providers has signed up. We're getting it done. So he can fearmonger, he can scare people, but we're going to get it done on pharma as well. We're going to make sure that diabetes patients get their medication. We're going to make sure that women get their contraceptive, because that's what freedom looks like. A woman who has choice over her own body.
I'd like to remind all ministers, all members, that answers should be directed, questions should be asked and answers should be directed through the chair. And I'm going to again ask members to make sure we don't skate too close to the line. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
What his plan does is quadruple the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre and imposes a single payer that bans women from using their existing private plans to get contraceptives or any other form of medication. That's what a single payer means. And that is not what freedom looks like, Mr. Speaker. What he actually wants to do is quadruple the carbon tax, which will grind our economy to a halt. It will be a nuclear winter for our economy. Why don't we allow Canadians to vote in a carbon tax election to decide if they're ready to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll tell you what freedom doesn't look like, and it doesn't look like Conservative members of Parliament taking all expenses, paid trips to Florida to talk about how...
The Honourable Member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Vito Lakes, I'd appreciate if he would, when he has his turn, and I know that he'll have his turn to ask questions, would refrain from speaking out of turn. The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons from the top, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll tell you what freedom doesn't look like, and it's Conservative members of Parliament taking all expensive paid trips to talk at anti-abortion conferences and to push forward an anti-abortion vision of Canada. Mr. Speaker, when he talks about women's rights, he neglects to share his hidden agenda that would take away their reproductive rights. Mr. Speaker, when he talks about freedom, he only talks about half of the story. Mr. Speaker, today what we are doing is demonstrating that this House does not have confidence in the leader of the Conservative Party.
Life would be decimated.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, time is running out for the Liberals. It's decision time. They must choose between economic justice for seniors or an election. They can put an end to the two classes of seniors they've created by depriving those aged under 74 and under of 10% of OAS granted to the oldest. Or they can go out and officially consult people, hoping very, very hard that the polls are wrong. We'll take the senior side. What will the Liberals choose? Time's running out. The Honourable Minister, Mr. Speaker, unlike the Bloc Québécois, it's the Liberal Party of Canada that works for seniors and has done so for recent years by increasing the GIS by $1,000, helping more than 1 million seniors in Canada. We increased 30% the gains from the GIS so that those who work can keep a larger portion of what they earn. The Bloc voted against that, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
The Liberals are too weak to stand up to Doug Ford, so some patients are leaving surgeries with thousands of dollars of bills. The Liberals are too weak to stand up to Daniel Smith, and so people in our province are forced to pay to see a doctor. See, that's what Conservatives do. They cut and gut healthcare so their big business buddies can use that to rip off Canadians even more. Why is the Liberal government letting Conservatives privatize our healthcare system?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if you're going to be talking about being too weak, 2 days after the NDP leader got a letter from the leader of the Conservative opposition saying to back out of standing up for pharmacare and standing up for improvements in the healthcare system, he ran away. And if he ran away from that, how is he going to stand up for Canadians, is what I would ask, Mr. Speaker. And I would say that we had a chance. We were working well together. We got things done on dental. 750,000 people, over 80% of providers. We were working well together on pharmacare. If he has ideas, he knows we were all ears. But he's all about politics, Mr. Speaker. He's all about trying to divide rather than working together.
Colleagues. The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
After 9 years of this Liberal NDP government, we know that they are just not worth the cost, and the evidence is everywhere you look. In Ontario, for the first time ever, over 1 million people visited a food bank in just 1 year. That's thanks to the radical Liberal NDP carbon tax. Ontario families say they just can't keep up with the mountain of debt and the taxes that this Prime Minister has poured all over them. So why won't this government call a carbon tax election and let Canadians decide?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and for Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to read an extract from a report that came out today from the Insurance Bureau of Canada, and I quote, "Summer of 2024 ranks as the most destructive season in Canadian history for insured losses due to severe weather. In only 2 months, July and August, this summer eclipsed the worst year on record and has pushed 2024 year-to-date tally over $7.7 billion in severe natural catastrophes, Mr. Speaker. What's the answer from the Leader of the Opposition? Let the planet burn. We won't take this on this side of the House, Mr. Speaker.
I know the member from St. Albert, Edmonton St. Albert would like to pose this question, but I'll ask him to wait his turn before taking the floor. The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, I thought the carbon tax was supposed to fix all that. They won't call a carbon tax election because they know exactly what Canadians will say. 2023 was the 8th consecutive year that food bank usage rose. By some great coincidence, it was also the 8th consecutive year of this Liberal government. So how many more people need to visit or need to be forced to a food bank before the Environment Minister admits that taxes are up, that costs are up, that crime is up, and that his time is up?
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
The reality, Mr. Speaker, is that the Conservative Party and its leader are not there to protect Canadians. They're there to protect the interest of their friends, like oil executives who attended a special event for the Leader of the Opposition. I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, that oil executives don't come to my fundraiser. I can guarantee you that. But what they want to do is take away, in his writing, Carlton, 58,000 people are receiving the Canada Carbon Rebate. In Thornhill, more than 60,000 people are receiving more money than what they pay in carbon pricing. We're helping with affordability, Mr. Speaker, and we're helping to fight climate change.
The Honourable Member from Foothills.
For 9 years, the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and yes, time is up. According to the Liberal NDP's government's own statistics, the number of Canadians suffering with food insecurity is up 111%.
Wow.
That is a quarter of Canadians who don't know where their next meal is coming from. But there is a solution. Axe the carbon tax and give Canadians the relief they need. They know that 70% of Canadians want to axe the tax. Will they listen to Canadians tomorrow and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It would be great in this House if the official opposition actually worked with facts. The vast majority of Canadians get more money back. We have a climate plan that is actually working, fighting the existential threat of climate change, but it is also creating economic opportunity and prosperity for the future. We have seen over 100 clean growth projects, $60 billion of investment. It's the $12 billion Dow invested in Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta. It's the Jansen potash mine. It's the Soyona lithium plant in Quebec. It is a plan that is working. They have no plan for the future on the environment and no plan on the economy.
The Honourable Member from Kelowna Lake Country.
The NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. It's reported a mother living in a homeless encampment in London, Ontario said, quote, "I'm a mum of 3 and I'm homeless. I just want to get inside into a warm place before winter so I can get my kids back with me where they belong." Tomorrow, on behalf of all Canadians, there's a chance to break down this costly government so we can build the homes they need. Will the NDP Liberal government let Canadians decide on a carbon tax election?
Let's go. Again, I'd like to remind the member from Timmins James Bay to only take the floor when he's recognized by the chair. The Honourable, and I remind all members, please, to only take the floor when they're recognized by the chair. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Whether it's my community of London or any Canadian community, Mr. Speaker, where homelessness exists, it's unacceptable. It is a tragic situation. Encampments should not exist. And when the Conservatives stand up and raise these points, they do a good thing. What's not a good thing is that they don't have a plan, Mr. Speaker. It's all a sideshow. It's an act on the other side. They don't care about people who are on the street. If they did, they would have something to say on the matter of homelessness. Instead, they use them here as props in the House of Commons. They film them in encampments, post them on social media, but they have no plan. They don't care, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Kelowna Lake Country.
Well, Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, homelessness is up and tent encampments are up. And in fact, homelessness is up 38% in Canada. There are now 1,400 tent encampments in just Ontario alone. Liberal photo ops won't build the 5.8 million homes that are needed to restore housing affordability in Canada. Tomorrow, on behalf of all Canadians, there's a chance to break down this costly government so we can build the homes they need. So will the NDP Liberal government let Canadians decide on a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, I work with that member on the House of Commons committee responsible for housing. I know she's sincere when she raises these points, but her party has no plan, Mr. Speaker. In fact, every single member on the opposite side, when they had a chance to vote in favour of measures to confront the challenge of homelessness, the crisis that we see on our streets, said no. They said no to more supports for communities. They said no to more support for not-for-profits. 87,000 people taken off the street as a result of investments we've made. We have more to do, and we will do it, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley.
After 9 years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and yes, now their time is up. The capital gains tax is yet another job-killing tax on small businesses. Now, Liberals will say it only applies to the top 0.13%, but what the finance minister won't say is that it will not apply to the bottom 99.87%. Tomorrow, the NDP and Bloc have a chance to bring down this costly government by voting for our Conservative non-confidence motion. Will they finally let Canadians decide in a carbon tax election?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, our government believes in tax fairness for all Canadians. That's because we believe that a Canadian teacher or nurse shouldn't be paying tax at a higher rate than a multimillionaire. That is because we believe that in Canada you shouldn't be able to tell the size of someone's paycheck by their smile. And that is because we believe that no teenage girl in Canada should get pregnant because she can't afford contraceptives. The way we pay for those essential programs, Mr. Speaker, is through tax fairness. But we know the only thing Conservatives stand for is a hidden agenda of cuts and austerity.
That's right.
The honourable member from Durham.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. Now, last week, we learned that the Parole Board of Canada granted day parole to a serial rapist who has been convicted in 2020 for assaulting 5 women. And that parole board, Mr. Speaker, is appointed by this Liberal government. The chair of the board answers to the Liberal Public Safety Minister. So when will the NDP Liberals start locking up violent repeat offenders?
Good question. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member opposite knows well that the parole board makes independent decisions of government. But, Mr. Speaker, what's sad is that the Conservatives would rather politicize the independence of our judicial system to create fear and fearmonger for their own political gain. Mr. Speaker, they want to undermine our democratic institutions for political gain. All Canadians should be very concerned about the Conservatives and their plans and their cuts in our criminal justice system.
Costs are up, taxes are up, crime is up, time is up, and now tariffs are up. The U.S. softwood lumber tariffs have just doubled. And what does this Prime Minister do? Does he make trade headlines? No, he's not making headlines, he's making punchlines on late night TV where he called the softwood lumber issue a small issue that matters. A small issue that matters, Mr. Speaker. It's 400,000 jobs. When is this Prime Minister going to figure out that he's the punchline and that it's time for a Prime Minister who will make this a large issue that matters for all Canadians, their jobs and their paychecks?
The Honourable Minister for international trade.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm really glad that the member opposite yesterday saw the Prime Minister's appearance on Stephen Colbert, because especially since we know that they get their news from Tucker Carlson. Yep. Canadians who watched last night's interview will know what all Canadians know, that this government stands up for our workers. We stand up for our forestry sector. We will continue to do this work for Canadians and for our workers. The forestry sector contributes enormous jobs to this country, and we will keep doing that work.
The honourable member from Bay of Quinte.
Mr. Speaker, lame excuses are also up. The last Prime Minister solved the softwood lumber deal in 80 days. It's been 9 years. And you know why? The last Prime Minister didn't back down. This Prime Minister backs down to Biden, to Obama, to Trump, and the result has been increased unemployment and the risk of another 400,000 jobs in the forestry sector. When this Prime Minister said Canada's back, he meant backed down. Right. Isn't it time for our Prime Minister who will stand up to Canadians once again?
The Honourable Minister for International Trade and Export Development.
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to securing trade deals, we're not going to take any lessons from the Conservatives on this. The Conservative Party wants us to ignore the environment. They want us to ignore workers. They want us to sign bad trade deals. You'll remember that in this House that they wanted us to capitulate on CUSMA. We didn't do that. They cheered on Brexit. We didn't do that. And they abandoned Ukrainians when they needed the most and when we negotiated free trade agreements. On this side of the House, we negotiate good deals, not just any deals, and we won't capitulate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
From Dufferin-Caledon.
After 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime's up, and time's up. Last night, the Prime Minister appeared on The Late Show to pathetically explain why he keeps backing down to American presidents on softwood lumber. He called his failure on softwood lumber a small issue. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of forestry workers have lost their jobs. It's an insult to them. After 9 years of repeatedly backing down to each and every president on softwood lumber, how can Canadians believe they'll ever get a deal to lift these punishing tariffs?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, our government has stood up to Trump and our government has stood up to Putin. Meanwhile, when Putin told the Conservatives to vote against the free trade deal with Ukraine, they said, okay, fine. And when Trump threatened Canada with 232 tariffs against steel and aluminum, we stood up to the U.S. You know what the Conservatives said? They said that was dumb, and they told us to back down. We did not. We will never back down to bullies. We will always stand up for Canadians.
The Honourable Member from Dufferin-Caledon.
It's pathetic. That from the government that allowed detonators, Canadian detonators, to end up in Russian landmines that blew up Ukrainian troops. They're a disgrace. They've backed down to Trump on softwood. They backed down from Obama on softwood. They backed down to Biden on softwood. And after 9 years of complete and total failure, tens of thousands of forestry workers have lost their jobs. She didn't even address it. And her Prime Minister insulted them by saying it's a small issue. We know this arrogant Prime Minister won't apologize to the forestry workers, so will they let him judge him in a carbon tax election?
Once again, members, I invite them to be very prudent and judicious in their choice of words. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, when our country faced an existential economic challenge, the threat that our free trade agreement with the United States would be torn up, our government stood up to the U.S. and the Conservatives ran scared. They told us to back down. When the U.S. imposed illegal 232 tariffs on our steel and aluminum, we stood up for Canadians. We imposed countervailing tariffs. The Conservatives told us to back down. Canadians remember that. We will never back down. We stand up for